How many years now? 25 years ago when I came to this country, if there was a word, that would be the biggest advantage to me. I wouldn't have gone through all that I went through. So I'm happy that we can here share our stories and feed off each other because of Brianna's vision. So today is International Women's Day, and we are gathered here very informally. This is a sisterhood. We have all made our marks. Sometimes in our corners, nobody sees what we are doing. But when we meet and we commiserate, we talk about the struggles, the victories that we've had, we see that there's one thing in common. We all have this faith that we can make it. But let us not be fooled. There's still racism, there's still all the struggles that we go through. We still have to, as mothers, as wives, as single parents, and as teachers, professors, wherever you find yourself, you still have to multitask. I was late in coming here because I had a call, an urgent call that I had to deal with. So it was, how do I deal with this in a way that the patient is safe, but also get here right on time? But knowing that I have sisterhood behind me, I did the best I could for the patients. The patient is stable, I'm here with you, and we are all happy. So, that being said, I just want to share a little bit about what I've encountered in my journey as a family physician here in Canada. So, the time when I came to Canada, we had just 120 positions Canada-wide for international medical graduates to enter into residency. And there were more than 3,000 physicians fighting for that spot. I don't think I'm a rocket scientist, just like many of us here. I knew that being a physician has been my passion since childhood. I grew up in a maternity home where my mom was a midwife. So very early on in my teenage years, medicine was the way to go. I helped her, and I came to Canada with my degree, plus another degree in health services research from the Netherlands. But the shock I had was that, no, it's not automatic. You have to, go through the motions, apply, and, follow the rules that have been set. All because you don't have the Canadian experience. But guess what? I did what everybody did. Put in the time. My son was a year old. I had to leave him with my husband and go to Toronto from Ottawa. We were in Ottawa then. And for 6 months, I laid on an airbed in, a single woman's second room that was meant for the son. I was more than happy to be there because it was Toronto that gave the opportunity to work with other physicians. And maybe they could give you a reference letter, to get that Canadian experience. So put yourself in a position, leaving a 1-year-old child with your husband, but this is where I give it to him, that he did his very best. So the emotional struggles, the psychological struggles, the feeling guilty that, I had to stop nursing very early on. I had to find a way of dealing with all that. And I tell you, that came from my faith, my relationship with God. Everybody has a way of finding strength. Mine, unashamedly, is my relationship with God. And I'm never ashamed to proudly profess that my vision, my philosophy, my values are built on that. Because it's easy to give up when you don't have something to hold on to. And that is where I found my strength, time and time again. So fast forward, I did get a position in residency. That was the easy part. When we started, I realized that in the sea of Caucasians, I was the only black woman. I had a colleague who came from the Caribbean. He was mixed race. So he looked like a Caucasian who had gone to Mexico in time. So I was it there. And our first meeting in pediatrics, they kept saying, "Oh, where's that Japanese resident, Chikata? Has he arrived?" So I'm like, "It's me." And the whole meeting went like, okay, there was a very uncomfortable, silence that followed, and I'm like, okay. But the way residency was, you work twice as hard and get half the recognition. That was my story. It's like a cliche, we say it all the time, but I actually experienced it. I will leave very early, get to clinic, an hour before everybody comes.
Wow.
And when clinic ends the day, I'll be there till it's 10 minutes for the whole place to be alarmed. Oh, that's like 3-4 hours after.
Wow.
This is how I survived. Because sometimes questions will be asked and, once I answer, it will be, okay, where did you say you studied? That look. But it gave me that boldness, to assert myself. There were still obstacles despite, the excellence, quote in quotes, that I thought, I answered every question. I did everything that I was, especially in women's health and obstetrics. I remember times when I'll be in the labor room. If I had to examine a patient, I'll be told, the patient says they are not comfortable with you. So another person will be called. Or one that really shook me, I did a pelvic exam and I was like, okay, this is one. Then I was told, the patient says it was too painful. So I lost the chance to, continue to examine her to see the delivery and all that. But my passion was in women's health. So, I told myself, if the system isn't going to allow me to be trained properly, I have to find a way. So I had to spend 1 year after I graduated to do a fellowship in women's health in another university where there was more diversity, where there was more support. And I'm grateful that I did that. The lesson I learned was that if there's a passion you have, don't let anyone trample on it. Even if the system is against you. Even if it just seems like you are getting a roadblock all the time. Because guess what? When I was done, I intentionally decided that I'll practice where I'm needed. And so I went to practice in areas where there wasn't any high-risk obstetric backup. I remember very well one night, I was called, I wasn't on call, but I think they had tried to get a woman who had placenta, a retained placenta after birth. She was bleeding really like mad. So I was called, and of course, I jumped up, I went there and did what I had to do, ordered all the medications and all that, because the other option was to get a helicopter to fly her over to the regional center and all that. And I cast my mind back and I say, first of all, a life was saved, but second of all, the government was paid tens of thousands of dollars. So when I reflect, I'm like, let's not be discouraged. If you have a passion, you really need to pursue it, because you may be placed in a position where you are the one who makes a difference. And so even giving up easily is one thing I want to say. It doesn't augur well for the community. It doesn't augur well for yourself. We have all been given skills and we need to hone them, no matter what the system brings. And this brings me to a couple other points. When we are talking about the barriers that we face as people of color, even in our professional spaces, you would think that medicine is a very dignified, respectful profession. But just like Rihanna was saying, it really doesn't matter what you do. There is something that is in you that needs to be honed to make a difference in your field. Through residency, I had 2 experiences where my attending physician, even though we were in a team, came from behind and grabbed my butt. And if anybody has been assaulted that way before, you would know how it feels like. First, I thought, oh, is this a trance? Did this really happen? I mean, so that whole day, I remember, instead of focusing on what was taught, if you ask me what's the case that we were handling was, I can't remember. Because my focus was in trying to figure out, I was in a white coat, so there was no way you could tell me that I was dressed inappropriately, So I dealt with that. And I was the only person of color. Who the hell am I going to tell this to believe me? First of all, there wasn't any Rihanna's there, right? So I had nobody to go to. I dealt with it, went into prayer, and I gathered myself in Chamdon. And then, not too long after, a colleague of mine, who was in another specialty, came and did the very same thing. And I'm like, okay, yes, I know that I'm in an area where there are not many people of color, there's no diversity. Is there something about Black women's butt that makes this keep happening? Honestly. Right? So again, I just dealt with it in prayer and, overcame it. But I said, the third time this happens, it has to be fire, no matter what. And thank God it didn't happen. So I passed through residency, and then I got into practices, different practices. I was in 2 practices, and the third one, a group practice owned by a man. And I remember the very day. It was a Friday, 26th of March 2021, when I went to work. And the owner was in my office sitting there. And he had a habit of doing that. I really didn't like it because I was paying for the space. But anytime I was in there, he would go sit in my office to see patients. So that day I determined that I need to speak up and put a stop to this. And it didn't end well. I said, I'm here, I'd like to sit in my office. Could you kindly go back to your office? And he snapped. He hit the roof, started yelling, screaming, hitting all manner of things. All I kept doing was, he said, get out of the clinic, get out of the office. This is mine. He kept saying, this is my place. And, I said, whoa. It was a very traumatic thing. I stood, and all I did was, if he was coming this way, I'll go. I knew he wouldn't hit me, because this is Canada. I had that behind me. I was confident that he wouldn't touch me, but it was the screaming and yelling. And the clinic manager came and said, Dr. Chikata, please step out. What is happening? And I'm like, I'm in my office. He needs to leave. I tell you, it was very frightening. But I also thought, this is your only chance to assert yourself. This cannot happen. So, stand your ground. This is the only chance you might get to make a difference if you have to stay here. But as time went on, I knew that that would be my last day. But I also want to send a clear message that I may be, weaker because I'm the woman, quote unquote. And if we entered a fight, he would beat me black and blue. But I would still stand my ground. So I stood there, and as he was yelling, I said, you know what? I think I need to call the college, the CPSA. And so when I said that, that made him kind of snap out to recognize that we do have rules that protect us. So for one thing, I'm grateful for this country, that there are laws that protect us no matter what. And his tone changed and all that. So, long story short, I stood my ground, went back, he had to leave, and I sat in my chair, closed the door. But then that was when I broke down crying. Everything that welled up in me came out at that point. So much came through my mind, and I decided that, I heard many people tell me, Setorme, it doesn't look like you're happy here. Why don't you start your own clinic? Why don't you do this? All I kept saying was, my focus is on patients. I cannot manage. I cannot, start a clinic. There's too much money involved. I don't have what it takes. All I want to do is to make people feel better. But that's not enough for us. As women of color, as women who encounter all these struggles, the discrimination, it's not enough. And I took the decision that although I'm going to lose income, I will still make that move. Because sometimes we don't see what we have, other people would see it. But it's time to make that decision and start believing in ourselves, follow our passion. I had never been content with different practices because it's all about the money. Don't get me wrong, without the money, you cannot run the business. It is the money that runs it. But in my journey, what I realized is that being more conscientious, diligent, going over and beyond, not just doing the barest minimum, but being intentional about offering service that is exceptional, that sets you apart, will bring the money ultimately. Whether you like it or not, because if you have two businesses the same type, side by side, one goes, clients go to one business and feel different and feel catered for and feel that the care, the experience is individualized. I tell you, before you know it, you will get people by word of mouth. Yes, Instagram algorithms, they are there, but they are not ironclad. It is the personal experience that makes a difference. I have lived it. I have more than 500 people on my waiting list, and I'm still struggling to get them off. So I decided that, it was worth investing. It was worth liquidating my savings, etc., to enter into a place or to create something that reflected my values, right? And this is how Compassion Medical came about. So to sum it up, my story is from trauma to triumph. And it has been the best decision ever. I'll tell you, it's not easy, but it's paid off, because right from designing the space, right, I had control over colors, what to bring in, the types of equipment. I was intentional about maintaining standard, no shortcuts, and it meant a lot of money being invested in it. But like I say, whenever people come through the doors, some people just sit there and say, can I just spend a bit of time here? And it's just the atmosphere. Some people describe it as Zen. Some people describe it as just calmness, stillness. And I get to play music that I choose. And it seems like patients love it, right? And take steps, be intentional. And Rihanna talked about our aesthetics. We just don't treat clients and let them go, get their money and go. I mean, the more you see, the more. We are very intentional from the type of machines that we choose to cater for all skin color, especially people of color. They always come back, and give raving reviews. So this is the process that, I've been through. The other component of Compassion Medical is that having gone through all the struggles I went through, I've been very intentional about keeping my doors open to new physicians who come to Canada, and especially in Alberta. So at the last count, there have been a bit more than 10 physicians who, I would say by the grace of God, because multitasking and taking and mentoring physicians is not easy. But they have had positions, some have graduated and they are practicing. And just this week, 3 physicians got matched in CAMS to residency programs. And I would say that the wisdom, the knowledge, how to mentor them and get them up to speed, where when they go for interviews, they stand out from amongst the tens of thousands of physicians now in Canada, just vying for a few spaces. They stand out. So for these physicians, I'm just so excited this week. It's made my heart so full that the time spent with them, time away from family, time away from the practice itself, just to spend time, because I know they will pay for it. The others who are already practicing, what I do is I use them as a backup. I tell them, I paid it forward. I have this new person. I'm going to link you up, show them the way. So I've just, started connecting, because it's too much for one person to handle, right? And the same thing can be replicated in engineering, health services, other food services, any career path represented here. I'll chip this in, that make sure that as you're nurturing and mentoring the new ones that are coming, empower them to also give back and mentor, because we need more of us in our communities to make a difference. Why am I pushing the agenda to get more people who are underrepresented to become certified as physicians in Canada? We are too few for the community. And we do have specific culturally sensitive issues that we need to deal with, right? If we don't have people who recognize these things, you will be catered for just like everyone else, right? But we need to be intentional when we are catering for people from Africa, people from places where religion is a big thing. If a woman comes to you and says that I want a provider who is a woman because of religious reasons, you need to have that conversation with them. But you also need to, cross that divide where if you need C-section, right, and you're in the hospital, and the obstetrician on call is a male, you have to make that decision. Is your life the priority? Is religion priority for you? That conversation has to be had. And I believe that when you take time to have that conversation with somebody who comes and says that religion is important for me, they will understand, be able to prepare for the time when they need to make that decision. If it's a man who is standing there saying that it's me, there's no one else who can come help you, right? You think many physicians here will take their time to give you that understanding and be sensitive enough to acknowledge that religion is a big thing in your life? No, they don't have the time to do that, right? So I make it a point that even though I'm not accepting new patients, when I'm approached by a new immigrant who doesn't know what to do and they're in critical condition and need some guidance, I certainly will make that time.